You decided to run away to him? Fine, go. But don't forget, your entire share in the company comes back to me. I won't give you a single penny.
The smell hit me first. Vanilla and lies, with just a hint of another man's cologne. My wife Gloria stood in our kitchen doorway at 11:23 p.m., her auburn hair still damp despite the December cold outside. She'd been gone for 3 days on what she called a regional HR conference in Portland. The same conference that, according to my quick Google search, had been canceled 2 weeks ago due to a COVID outbreak. "Hey, honey," she said, not quite meeting my eyes as she dropped her leather overnight bag by the door. The bag that used to bulge with conference materials and dirty laundry now seemed suspiciously light. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing lumber orders for my family's business, Duran Timber. "How was the conference?" "Oh, boring seminars about workplace harassment policies." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "I'm exhausted, going straight to bed." I watched her disappear upstairs, noting the slight limp in her step and the way she favored her left side. "Interesting. My name is Glenn Durand, and I've been married to Gloria for 12 years. I'm 42, she's 38. And until 3 months ago, I thought we had a pretty decent marriage. Sure, she'd become increasingly critical of my small-town lumber business and my lack of ambition, but I figured that was just her way of pushing me to grow. I was wrong. The first real sign came during Thanksgiving dinner at her parents' house. Gloria's father, Richard Pemberton, had invited a family friend named James Hartley, a smooth-talking corporate raider who specialized in buying out small businesses and maximizing their potential. James spent the entire evening asking pointed questions about Duran Timber's finances while Gloria hung on his every word. "You know, Glenn," James had said over dessert, his perfectly capped teeth gleaming, "a business like yours has so much untapped potential. With the right management and capital investment, you could triple your revenue within 2 years." "Thanks for the advice," I'd replied, "but we're doing just fine." James had exchanged a look with Gloria's father. "Of course. Though I have to wonder, are you really thinking about Gloria's future? A woman with her education and ambitions deserves security?" That's when I knew. Now, sitting alone in my kitchen, I opened my laptop and began doing what I do best, methodical research. I've always been detail-oriented, a trait that served me well in both business and life. Within an hour, I had confirmation that the Portland HR conference had been canceled. I also found something interesting. James Hartley had checked into the Eastland Park Hotel in Portland the same 3 days Gloria was supposedly at her conference. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and considered my options. Some men might have confronted their cheating wives immediately, demanding explanations and tearful reconciliations. Others might have quietly filed for divorce and tried to move on with dignity. But I'm not most men. I'm a Durand, and we've been surviving in this harsh Maine climate for 4 generations by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than anyone expects. My great-grandfather built this business during the Depression by undercutting competitors and buying their equipment at bankruptcy auctions. My grandfather expanded it during World War II by securing military contracts through connections and careful political maneuvering. My father modernized it in the 80s by embracing new technology while his competitors clung to outdated methods. And me? I was about to teach my wife and her lover a lesson they'd never forget. I spent the next 2 hours planning. Not revenge, not yet. First, I needed intelligence. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with, who my enemies were, and what weapons they thought they had against me. By 3 a.m., I had a preliminary strategy. I also had something else, a cold, calculating anger that felt surprisingly good. The next morning, Gloria was gone before I woke up, unusual for a Saturday. She'd left a note saying she was meeting her friend Daphne for brunch, and then shopping. More lies, but I let it slide. I had work to do. I drove to Duran Timber, where I found my shop manager, Ben Martinez, already at work despite the early hour. Ben was an ex-Marine who'd worked for me for 8 years. He was also one of the few people I trusted completely. "Morning, boss," he said, looking up from the inventory sheets. "You look like hell." "Thanks for the honesty." I poured coffee from the pot Ben always kept brewing. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to keep it between us." Ben set down his clipboard. "Shoot. If someone was trying to take over this business, legally, through manipulation or coercion, what would be their most likely approach?" Ben studied my face. "This about Gloria?" I shouldn't have been surprised he'd figured it out. Ben had an uncanny ability to read people and situations. "What makes you say that?" "She's been asking a lot of questions lately. about finances, about your ownership structure, about whether you have any partners or investors. He paused. Also, she asked me if I'd be interested in staying on if there was new management. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. When was this? 2 weeks ago. I told her I work for you, not the company. She didn't seem happy about that. I felt a surge of gratitude toward Ben, followed immediately by rage at Gloria's betrayal. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was actively working to destroy everything I'd built. What would you need to take over a business like this? I asked. Ben thought for a moment. Depends on how it's structured. If it's a sole proprietorship, they'd need to get you to sign it over voluntarily or prove you're incompetent. If it's incorporated, they'd need controlling shares or to prove financial mismanagement. It's incorporated. I own 90% of the shares. Gloria owns 10%. I gave them to her as an anniversary gift 5 years ago. Then they'd need you to sign over more shares, or they'd need to manufacture some kind of crisis that forces you to bring in outside investors. Ben's expression darkened. Or they could try to prove you're embezzling or mismanaging funds, get you removed as CEO. The pieces were falling into place. James Hartley's questions about finances, Gloria's sudden interest in the business operations, her request to review our tax returns for her own peace of mind. Ben, I need you to do me a favor. Can you discreetly audit all our financial records from the past year? Look for anything unusual, missing receipts, unexplained expenses, anything that could be misinterpreted as improper. You got it. Anything else? I thought about it. Yeah, if anyone comes around asking questions about the business, anyone at all, I want to know about it immediately. Ben nodded. Consider it done. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing our corporate documents and business insurance policies. Everything was in order, but I made copies of all the important papers and stored them in my personal safe at home. If Gloria and James were planning some kind of corporate coup, they'd find it harder than they expected. Around noon, I drove to Marlene's Tavern on Main Street. Marlene had owned the place for 20 years, and it was the unofficial information exchange for our small town. If you wanted to know who was sleeping with whom, who was having money troubles, or who was planning to leave town, Marlene's was your first stop. Glenn! Marlene called out as I walked in. She was a sturdy woman in her 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Little early for you, isn't it? Just wanted a quiet beer and maybe some conversation. I settled onto a bar stool and accepted the Budweiser she slid across the bar. Conversation, huh? What kind of conversation? The kind where I might learn something interesting about my wife's new friend, James Hartley. Marlene's eyebrows rose. Ah, that kind of conversation. She leaned against the bar, lowering her voice. What do you want to know? Everything. For the next hour, Marlene filled me in on James Hartley's reputation. He'd moved to town 6 months ago, renting the big glass house on Hillcrest Drive. He claimed to be semi-retired, but everyone knew he was actively looking for local businesses to acquire. He'd already made offers to buy the hardware store and the auto repair shop, both of which had been rejected. He's smooth, Marlene said, but there's something off about him. He tips well and says all the right things, but his eyes are cold, and he asks too many personal questions. What kind of questions? About people's finances, their family situations, their weaknesses, like he's looking for leverage. She paused. He's been asking about you specifically. My grip tightened on the beer bottle. What about me? Your marriage, your business, whether you have any debts or legal troubles. I told him to mind his own damn business, but others might not be so discreet. I thanked Marlene and left a generous tip. As I walked to my truck, my phone buzzed with a text from Gloria. Running late. Don't wait for dinner. We'll be home by 10. It was 2 p.m. Even allowing for shopping and a long lunch, that was a lot of time unaccounted for. I drove past the mall and the restaurants where Gloria claimed to be spending her day. Her car wasn't at any of them. But as I headed home, I spotted it in the parking lot of the Hillside Inn, a discreet motel on the edge of town, parked right next to James Hartley's silver BMW. I didn't confront Gloria that night. Instead, I lay awake planning my next moves while she slept peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about her new life with James and the business they planned to steal from me. The opportunity came 3 days later, on December 23rd. Gloria had invited her parents for Christmas Eve dinner, and she'd insisted we invite James as well. He's new in town and doesn't have family here, she'd said. It would be rude not to include him. I'd agreed with a smile, knowing this would be the perfect chance to let them know I wasn't the naive fool they thought I was. I spent the morning preparing. Not just the meal, Gloria had handled most of that. but my strategy. I reviewed every piece of evidence I'd gathered, every detail of their plan that I'd uncovered. By the time our guests arrived, I was ready. Gloria's parents, Richard and Margaret Pemberton, arrived at 5 o'clock sharp. Richard was a retired bank president who'd never liked me, viewing me as beneath his daughter's social status. Margaret was a social climber who measured everyone by their net worth and connections. James arrived 15 minutes later, carrying an expensive bottle of wine and wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Glenn," he said, extending his hand with that practiced smile. "Thanks so much for including me. I know how precious family time is." "Of course," I replied, shaking his hand perhaps a bit too firmly. "After all, you're practically family already." I saw Gloria's eyes widen slightly, but she recovered quickly. "James, let me get you some wine." We made small talk through appetizers in the first course. James regaled us with stories of his business successes, carefully positioning himself as a savvy investor and turnaround specialist. Richard and Margaret hung on his every word, clearly impressed by his wealth and sophistication. "You know," Richard said as Gloria served the main course, "James has been telling us about some exciting opportunities in the area, local businesses with real potential for growth." "Is that so?" I cut into my steak with deliberate precision. "What kind of businesses?" James leaned forward. "Well, without naming names, there are several family operations that could benefit from professional management and capital investment. The lumber industry, for instance, has tremendous potential if modernized properly." "Fascinating. And how exactly would this modernization work?" "It's really about bringing in experienced leadership and implementing proven business practices. Sometimes the current owners are too emotionally attached to outdated methods." Margaret nodded approvingly. "It's so important to think strategically about the future." "Absolutely," I agreed. "Speaking of the future, James, I understand you've been asking around town about my business." The room went quiet. James's smile faltered for just a moment before returning full force. "Just casual curiosity. I like to understand the local business landscape." "Of course. And, Gloria, I appreciate how interested you've become in our operations lately. All those questions about finances and management structure, it shows real partnership." Gloria's face was flushed, but whether from wine or anxiety, I couldn't tell. "I just want to understand what we've built together." "What we've built." Interesting phrase. I set down my fork and looked around the table. "Since we're all here together, maybe this is a good time to clear up some misconceptions." Richard frowned. "What kind of misconceptions?" "Well, for starters, the idea that Duran Timber is somehow vulnerable to a takeover or needs outside management." I pulled out a folder I'd placed on the sideboard earlier. "See? I've been doing some research of my own." I opened the folder and spread out several documents. "These are our financial statements for the past 5 years. As you can see, we're not only profitable, but growing steadily. We have no debt, substantial cash reserves, and long-term contracts that guarantee revenue for the next 3 years." James leaned back in his chair, his expression carefully neutral. "I also have copies of our corporate structure documents," I continued. "I own 90% of the company outright. The remaining 10% belongs to Gloria, but those shares come with specific restrictions. They can't be sold or transferred without my consent, and they revert to me automatically in case of divorce." Margaret gasped. "Divorce? Who said anything about divorce?" "Just covering all the bases," I said mildly. "After all, you never know when someone might get the wrong idea about their options." I pulled out another document. "This is particularly interesting, a copy of our prenuptial agreement. Gloria, I don't think you've read this carefully in recent years. Section 12 specifically states that in the event of adultery, the offending party forfeits all claims to marital property and business assets." The color drained from Gloria's face. "Glenn, what are you doing?" "Just making sure everyone understands the situation." I turned to James. "I also found this interesting. Hotel receipts from the Eastland Park in Portland charged to your credit card for the same dates Gloria was supposedly at a conference, the conference that was canceled 2 weeks before she left town." James started to stand. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "Sit down," I said quietly, but with enough steel in my voice that he complied. "We're not done yet." I pulled out the final document. "This is a restraining order application, already filled out and ready to file. It details a pattern of harassment and attempted corporate espionage by James Hartley, including attempts to manipulate my wife into providing confidential business information." Richard found his voice. Now see here, Glenn. No, Richard, you see here. I stood up, placing my hands on the table. Your daughter and her boyfriend thought they could manipulate me into giving up my life's work. They thought I was just some dumb small-town businessman who wouldn't notice his wife screwing around with a corporate raider. Gloria burst into tears. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been feeding James information about our business, hoping he could find a way to force me out or manufacture some kind of crisis that would require outside investment. Then you divorce me, take half of everything, and ride off into the sunset with your new sugar daddy. I walked around the table until I was standing directly behind James's chair. The problem is, you picked the wrong target. I'm not some naive small-town hick. I'm a fourth-generation businessman who survived every economic downturn, every industry change, and every competitor who thought they could take what my family built. James finally spoke, his voice tight. You can't prove any of this. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. James, I don't have to prove anything. I just have to make your life so miserable that you'll crawl back to whatever city you came from and never bother my family again. I returned to my seat and calmly began cutting my steak again. Dinner's getting cold. We should eat before it's completely ruined. The rest of the meal passed in tense silence. Richard and Margaret left immediately after dessert, barely saying goodbye. James mumbled some excuse about an early morning and practically ran to his car. Gloria sat at the table, still crying softly. How long? I asked. 2 months, she whispered. And the business plan? It was his idea. He said you were holding me back, that I deserved better. I nodded. Pack a bag. You can stay at your parents' house until you figure out what you want to do. Glenn, please. Pack a bag, Gloria. We'll talk about lawyers and paperwork after Christmas. She went upstairs, and I heard her moving around in the bedroom. 20 minutes later, she came down with a suitcase. I'm sorry, she said at the door. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. After she left, I poured myself a bourbon and sat in my living room, looking at the Christmas tree we decorated together just a week ago. I should have felt sad or angry or betrayed. Instead, I felt something much more dangerous. I felt motivated. The day after Christmas, I drove to the office to find Ben already there despite the holiday. Heard you had an interesting dinner party, he said without looking up from the paperwork he was organizing. News travels fast. Marlene called me this morning, said James Hartley was at the tavern until closing time, drinking whiskey and talking about how he was going to destroy that arrogant bastard. Ben finally looked at me. Figured you might want to know. I poured coffee and settled into my chair. What else did Marlene say? That Gloria's been calling everyone she knows, trying to get sympathy. Telling people you humiliated her in front of her family, that you're being cruel and vindictive. And are people buying it? Ben shrugged. Some are. Others remember how she used to talk about wanting to leave this backward little town for somewhere more sophisticated. They're not surprised she found herself a city boy with money. Over the next few days, I watched the battle lines form. Gloria's allies rallied around her, her best friend Daphne, who worked as her assistant in the HR department, her brother Leland, a perpetual loser who was always borrowing money, and her Aunt Margot, the town's self-appointed social coordinator and gossip queen. My allies were fewer but more solid. Ben, of course, Marlene at the tavern, my elderly neighbor Mrs. Penny, who'd known my family for 60 years. And surprisingly, my nephew Joel, a 22-year-old computer science dropout who'd been working part-time at the lumber yard. Uncle Glenn, Joel said on December 28th, I need to tell you something. We were in my office going over inventory reports. Joel had been quiet all morning, which was unusual for him. What's on your mind? Gloria approached me last month. She wanted me to help her access your computer files. Business records, financial information, personal emails. I set down my pen. And? I told her I couldn't do that. She offered me $5,000. Joel's face reddened. I told her to go to hell. I felt a surge of pride in the young man. Thank you for telling me. There's more. She said if I didn't help her, she'd make sure I got fired after she and her business partner took over the company. Her business partner? That's what she called James. She said they were going to modernize Duran Timber and bring in professional management. Anyone who wasn't on board with the new vision would be replaced. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. Gloria and James had been planning a complete takeover, not just a hostile acquisition. They wanted to gut the company and rebuild it in their image, regardless of who got hurt in the process. Joel, how good are you with computers? Really good, I mean. He grinned. Good enough to get kicked out of college for hacking into the grade database. Interesting. Hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to gather information about a person's business activities, financial situation, or personal communications, how would they go about it? Hypothetically, there are lots of ways. Social media surveillance, public record searches, credit reports if you have the right access, email monitoring if you can get into their accounts. He paused. Why? James Hartley has been asking a lot of questions around town. I'd like to know more about him, his real financial situation, his business history, whether he's done this kind of thing before. Joel's eyes lit up. I can help with that. Give me a couple days. That afternoon, I had an unexpected visitor. Daphne Morrison knocked on my office door, looking nervous but determined. Glenn, can we talk? Daphne was a thin, anxious woman in her early 30s who'd been Gloria's best friend since high school. She worshipped Gloria and had never liked me, viewing me as an obstacle to Gloria's social ambitions. What can I do for you, Daphne? I want you to know that what you did to Gloria was cruel and unnecessary. She made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to be humiliated like that. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Sit down. I'd rather stand. Suit yourself. What exactly do you think I did wrong? You ambushed her in front of her family. You could have handled this privately with dignity. I laughed. Dignity? Daphne, your best friend was planning to steal my business and destroy my livelihood. She was feeding confidential information to a corporate raider who wanted to force me out of the company my great-grandfather built. And you think I should have handled that with dignity? Daphne's confidence wavered. That's not... She wouldn't. She wouldn't what? Betray me? Lie to me? Sleep with another man while planning to take everything I've worked for? I stood up and walked around the desk. Did you know about James Hartley? Gloria said they were just friends. Did you know she was asking Joel to hack into my computer files? Daphne's face went pale. No. Did you know she was telling people that anyone who didn't support her and James would be fired once they took over the company? That's not... She wouldn't say that. I pulled out my phone and played a recording Joel had made of his conversation with Gloria. Daphne listened in growing horror as Gloria's voice detailed her plans for restructuring the company and eliminating deadweight employees. When the recording ended, Daphne sank into the chair she'd refused earlier. She said you were holding her back, she whispered, that you didn't appreciate her intelligence and ambition. She said James understood her potential. I'm sure he did. He understood her potential to help him steal a profitable business. Daphne was crying now. I thought she was just unhappy. I didn't know she was planning this. What did she ask you to do? She wanted me to find out about your personal finances, bank accounts, investments, debts. She said she needed to understand the full picture before making any major life decisions. And did you? Daphne nodded miserably. I work in HR. I have access to payroll information, insurance records, retirement account details. I gave her copies of everything. I felt a cold rage building, but I kept my voice level. What else? She wanted me to document any instances of you being inappropriate at work. Sexual harassment, discrimination, anything that could be used to force you out. And there wasn't anything. You've always been professional, respectful. I told her that, but she said I wasn't looking hard enough. I walked back to my desk and sat down. Daphne, I want you to understand something. Your best friend wasn't just cheating on me. She was trying to destroy me completely. She wanted my business, my reputation, my livelihood. She was willing to ruin innocent people like you and Joel to get what she wanted. Daphne looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. What are you going to do? That depends. Are you going to keep helping her, or are you going to help me? I don't understand. Gloria and James aren't done. They're going to try to salvage their plan, probably by spreading lies about me or finding some other way to damage my reputation. I need to know what they're planning. Daphne was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. She's staying at her parents' house, but she's been meeting with James every day. They're talking to lawyers, trying to find some way to challenge the prenup or force you to sell the business. What else? James has been asking Leland to gather information about your personal life, bar tabs, gambling debts, anything that could make you look bad in court. And what has Leland found? Nothing. You don't gamble, you barely drink, you've never been arrested. James is frustrated because you don't have any obvious weaknesses. I smiled grimly. That's because I learned a long time ago that in business, your enemies will use any weakness against you. So I don't give them any. Daphne stood up. Glenn, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I know, but it did happen, and now we all have to deal with the consequences. After Daphne left, I called Ben into my office. We need to accelerate our timeline, I told him. They're not going to give up easily. What do you want me to do? Start documenting everything, every conversation, every phone call, every person who comes asking questions. I want a complete record of their harassment and attempted corporate espionage. You got it. Anything else? I thought about it. Yeah, it's time to go on the offense. Joel came through with information about James Hartley that was even more damaging than I'd hoped. This guy's a real piece of work, Joel said, spreading printouts across my desk. His real name is James Harrison. He changed it legally 3 years ago after a bankruptcy in Connecticut. I studied the documents. What kind of bankruptcy? He was running an investment firm that collapsed when the SEC investigated him for securities fraud. No criminal charges, but he lost everything and got banned from the securities industry. So he reinvented himself as a business acquisition specialist. Gets better. He's done this exact same scam in 3 other small towns. Targets married women whose husbands own profitable businesses, seduces them, gets them to provide inside information, then tries to force a buyout or takeover. I looked at the photos Joel had printed from various social media accounts. James with different women in different towns, always the same pattern. Older, married, wealthy. What happened to the other women? 2 got divorced and lost everything when their husbands' businesses collapsed. 1 committed suicide. Joel's voice was grim. The guy's a predator. Any of them press charges? 1 tried. She claimed fraud and emotional manipulation, but James had covered his tracks too well. He always makes sure the women are willing participants, so it looks like consensual adultery rather than criminal fraud. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. Gloria wasn't James's first victim, and she wouldn't be his last unless someone stopped him. Joel, I need you to make copies of everything and store them somewhere safe. Then I want you to contact the women from the other towns, see if they'd be willing to talk to Gloria. You think that'll change her mind? Maybe. Or maybe it'll just give her information she needs to make better decisions. That afternoon, I drove to the Pemberton house to see Gloria. Richard answered the door, his face hostile. She doesn't want to see you. That's fine. I just want to give her something. I handed him a manila envelope. She should read this before she makes any permanent decisions. What is it? Information about her boyfriend's history with married women. Richard's expression shifted from hostility to curiosity. What kind of history? The kind that ends badly for everyone except James. Make sure she reads it, Richard. All of it. I drove home and waited. It took 3 hours. Gloria called at 8 o'clock, her voice shaking. Is this real? Every word. I had it independently verified. The woman in Vermont, she killed herself? After James cleaned out her business accounts and disappeared. Her husband divorced her, she lost custody of her kids, and she couldn't live with what she'd done. Gloria was crying. He told me he loved me. He said we were going to build something beautiful together. He told the others the same thing. Gloria, you're not the first, and you won't be the last unless someone stops him. What do you want me to do? I want you to help me destroy him before he does this to someone else. There was a long pause. How? Meet me tomorrow at Marlene's. Bring Daphne. We'll figure it out together. The next day, Gloria, Daphne, and I sat in a corner booth at Marlene's Tavern, planning James Hartley's downfall. Gloria looked terrible, pale, thin, with dark circles under her eyes. Daphne kept glancing nervously at the door as if she expected James to burst in at any moment. He's been calling me constantly, Gloria said, asking about your reaction, whether you seem willing to negotiate, what your lawyers are saying. What have you told him? That you're angry but might be open to a financial settlement to avoid a messy divorce? She looked ashamed. He wants me to ask for half of everything, including the business. Perfect. Here's what we're going to do. I outlined my plan. It was risky, but if it worked, James would be out of our lives permanently and unable to hurt anyone else. You're going to tell him I'm desperate to avoid a scandal and willing to make a deal. Set up a meeting for tomorrow night at the old paper mill on River Road. Tell him I want to discuss terms privately, away from lawyers and family. He'll be suspicious, Daphne said. Maybe, but he's greedy. And he thinks he's smarter than me. His ego won't let him pass up the chance to gloat. Gloria nodded slowly. What about after? What happens to us? I looked at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt a mixture of sadness and determination. That depends on you. If you help me stop James, we can discuss a fair divorce settlement. If you don't, I shrugged. The prenup stands, and you get nothing. That's not much of a choice. It's more of a choice than James gave his other victims. That evening, Gloria called James and set up the meeting. I listened on speakerphone as she played her part perfectly, sounding desperate and defeated. Glenn's scared, she told him. He knows about us and he knows about the business plan. He wants to make a deal before this gets out and ruins his reputation. What kind of deal? James's voice was eager. He'll sell you 40% of the company for $2 million. In exchange, you disappear and never contact me again. There was a pause. 40% isn't controlling interest. It's enough to force major decisions and block anything you don't like. Plus, he's willing to step down as CEO and let you run day-to-day operations. Another pause. When and where? Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock at the old paper mill. He wants privacy. I'll be there. After Gloria hung up, she looked at me with something that might have been admiration. You're really going to destroy him, aren't you? I'm going to give him exactly what he deserves. The abandoned Riverside paper mill had been closed for 15 years, a victim of changing technology and foreign competition. The buildings were still structurally sound, but they felt haunted. Empty windows staring out like dead eyes, machinery covered in rust and shadows. I arrived an hour early, accompanied by Ben and Joel. We'd spent the afternoon preparing, and everything was in place. You sure about this? Ben asked as we did a final check of our equipment. I'm sure. James Hartley has destroyed enough lives. It ends tonight. Joel was monitoring his laptop, which was connected to a series of small cameras and microphones we'd placed throughout the main building. Audio and video are good. We'll capture everything. At exactly 9 o'clock, James's BMW pulled into the gravel parking lot. He sat in his car for several minutes, probably checking for signs of ambush. Finally, he got out and walked toward the main entrance, his expensive shoes crunching on broken glass and debris. I met him in the main production floor, a cavernous space filled with covered machinery and shadows. A single work light provided illumination, creating a circle of harsh white light surrounded by darkness. Glenn, James said, his voice echoing in the empty space. Atmospheric choice of venue? I thought it was appropriate. A dead business seemed like the right place to discuss killing another one. James smiled, that same practiced expression I'd seen at Christmas dinner. I prefer to think of it as evolution. Your business model is outdated, Glenn. I'm offering you a chance to modernize and profit. By sleeping with my wife and stealing my company? By bringing professional management and capital investment to an underperforming asset? His smile widened. The personal relationship with Gloria is just a bonus. I felt that cold rage building again, but I kept my voice level. Let's talk numbers. You want 40% for $2 million? That's the opening offer. I think we both know the real value is higher. Do we? What exactly do you think this company is worth? James pulled out a leather portfolio and opened it to reveal several documents. Based on your revenue, assets, and market position, I estimate the total value at approximately $8 million. 40% would be worth $3.2 million, but I'm willing to pay $2 million as a goodwill gesture. I laughed. Goodwill? Is that what you call screwing my wife? I call it providing her with the attention and respect she deserves. Gloria is a remarkable woman, Glenn. She has vision, ambition, intelligence. You've been holding her back. And you're going to set her free? We're going to build something together, a business empire that spans multiple industries and markets. James's eyes gleamed with greed and ambition. Gloria will be my partner in every sense of the word. Your partner, like the women in Connecticut, Vermont, and New Hampshire were your partners? James's smile faltered. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out my own folder and spread Joel's research across a nearby table. Susan Morrison in Connecticut, divorced, lost her husband's construction business, died by suicide. Patricia Wells in Vermont, divorced, lost custody of her children, now working as a waitress. Jennifer Chen in New Hampshire, still fighting in court, but she'll probably lose everything too. James's face had gone pale in the harsh work light. You've been busy. I have. I also know your real name is James Harrison, that you're a convicted securities fraudster, and that you've been running this same scam for 3 years. Those women made their own choices. After you manipulated them, lied to them, and used them to steal from their husbands. I stepped closer. Just like you're trying to use Gloria to steal from me. James stepped back, his hand moving toward his jacket pocket. This conversation is over. No, it's not, I whistled, and Ben emerged from the shadows behind James while Joel appeared from the opposite direction. We're just getting started. James spun around, realizing he was surrounded. What is this? This is justice. See, James, you made a mistake when you came to my town and targeted my wife. You thought I was just another small-town businessman you could manipulate and destroy, but I'm not. I nodded to Joel, who pressed a key on his laptop. Suddenly, the mill was filled with sound. Recordings of James's conversations with Gloria, his phone calls to lawyers, his discussions about taking over my business. I've been recording everything for the past week, I said. Every crime you've planned, every law you've broken, every lie you've told. James's composure finally cracked. You can't prove anything. It's all circumstantial. Maybe, but I don't need to prove anything in court. I just need to make sure everyone in town knows exactly who you are and what you've done. I nodded to Ben, who produced a thick manila envelope. Copies of all our evidence are being delivered to the police, the district attorney, the local newspaper, and every business owner in town. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know that James Hartley is really James Harrison, convicted fraudster and predator. You can't do this. I can, and I am, but I'm not unreasonable. I'm prepared to offer you a choice. James's eyes darted between Ben and Joel, looking for an escape route. There wasn't one. What kind of choice? You can leave town tonight. Drive away, never come back, never contact Gloria again, never run this scam on anyone else. In exchange, I won't press charges for attempted corporate espionage, fraud, or criminal harassment. And if I refuse, then I destroy you completely. Criminal charges, civil lawsuits, public exposure. I'll make sure every potential victim knows your name and your methods. You'll never be able to run this scam again. James was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. What about Gloria? What about her? She was a willing participant. She knew what we were planning. I smiled, a cold expression that made James take another step backward. Gloria is my wife. Whatever mistakes she's made, she's still family. You're just a predator who tried to use her. She'll never forgive you for this. Maybe not. But she'll be alive and free, which is more than I can say for Susan Morrison. James's shoulders sagged in defeat. Fine. I'll leave. Tonight. Right now. Pack your things and get out of my town. James nodded and started walking toward the exit. When he reached the door, he turned back. This isn't over, Glenn. Yes, it is. Because if I ever see you again, if you ever contact Gloria or anyone else in my family, if you ever run this scam on another woman, I'll finish what I started tonight. And next time, I won't be so generous. James left without another word. We watched his BMW disappear into the night, taillights fading into darkness. Think he'll stay gone? Ben asked. He'll stay gone. Men like James are cowards at heart. They only prey on people they think are weaker than them. Joel was packing up his equipment. What about Gloria? I thought about my wife, probably sitting in her parents' house right now, waiting to hear how the meeting went. That's between her and me. I found Gloria at Marlene's Tavern the next morning, sitting alone in the same corner booth where we'd planned James's downfall. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red from crying. Is he gone? He's gone. I slid into the seat across from her. He won't be back. What did you do to him? I gave him a choice. He made the smart decision. Gloria nodded, staring into her coffee cup. Daphne told me about the other women, the one who killed herself. Susan Morrison. She was 34, had 2 kids. James convinced her to embezzle money from her husband's business to fund a fake investment scheme. When it all came out, she lost everything. I could have been her. You could have been. But you're not. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Gloria spoke. What happens now? That's up to you. The divorce papers are already filed. You can contest them if you want, but the prenup is ironclad. I don't want to contest them. I just want... She trailed off. What? I want to understand how we got here. We used to be happy, didn't we? I thought about it. We used to be content. I'm not sure that's the same thing. I felt trapped, Glenn. Like I was suffocating in this small town, in our small life. James made me feel like I could be more than just the wife of a lumberyard owner. You could have talked to me about that. Would you have listened? Really listened? Not just told me I was being silly or ungrateful? I considered her question honestly. Maybe not, I was so focused on the business, on maintaining what my family built, that I probably didn't pay enough attention to what you needed. Does that excuse what I did? No, but it explains it. Gloria finally looked up at me. I'm sorry, Glenn. Not just sorry I got caught. Sorry for all of it. The lying, the cheating, the plan to steal your business. You didn't deserve any of that. No, I didn't. Can you ever forgive me? I thought about forgiveness, about redemption, about second chances. Then I thought about Susan Morrison, hanging from a rope in her garage while her children slept upstairs. I can understand you, Gloria. I can even pity you. But forgive you? No, some things can't be forgiven. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. What about the others? Daphne, Leland, my parents? Daphne helped us stop James. She gets a pass. Leland can stay away from me and my business and we'll be fine. Your parents, I shrugged. They raised you to be exactly what you became. We don't have anything to say to each other. And me? You'll get the divorce settlement specified in the prenup. Enough to start over somewhere else, but not enough to live the lifestyle James promised you. Gloria wiped her eyes with a napkin. I suppose I deserve that. You deserve worse. But I'm not a vindictive man, despite what you might think. Yes, you are. You destroyed James completely. James was a predator who destroyed innocent people for money. You were just a woman who made bad choices because she was unhappy. I stood up. There's a difference. I left Gloria in the tavern and drove to my office, where I found Ben and Joel waiting with the morning newspaper. You made the front page, Ben said, grinning. The headline read, Local Businessman Exposes Corporate Fraud Scheme. The article detailed James's history and his attempt to take over Duran Timber through manipulation and deception. My name was mentioned as the victim who'd uncovered the plot and driven the fraudster out of town. How do you feel about being a hero? Joel asked. I'm not a hero. I'm just a man who protected what was his. Over the next few days, the story spread throughout the region. 2 other women came forward with similar stories about James Harrison, providing additional evidence for potential criminal charges. The district attorney opened an investigation, though James had disappeared completely. My friends and neighbors treated me with a mixture of respect and wariness. They appreciated that I'd protected the community from a predator, but they'd also seen what I was capable of when threatened. It was exactly the reputation I wanted. Gloria left town the following week, moving to Portland to stay with a college friend while she looked for work. We spoke only once more when she came to pick up her remaining belongings. Will you be all right? She asked as she loaded boxes into her car. I'll be fine. The business is stronger than ever, and I've learned some valuable lessons about trust and vigilance. I meant emotionally. This house is going to be very quiet. I looked at the home we'd shared for 12 years, thinking about all the memories contained within its walls. Some of them had been good. Quiet isn't necessarily bad. I've got work to do, people who depend on me. That's enough. Gloria nodded and got in her car. As she drove away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. #. Epilogue. Winter's End. 3 months later, I was working late in my office when Joel knocked on the door. Uncle Glenn, there's someone here to see you. I looked up from the contracts I'd been reviewing. Who is it? Says her name is Patricia Wells. She drove up from Vermont. I remembered the name from Joel's research, one of James Harrison's previous victims. Send her in. Patricia Wells was a woman in her early 40s, thin and nervous, but with determined eyes. She sat across from my desk and studied my face carefully. You're the man who stopped James Harrison? I'm the man who ran him out of my town. What can I do for you, Miss Wells? I want to thank you, and I want to tell you that he's been arrested. I set down my pen. Arrested? In Florida. He was running the same scam on a woman in Tampa, but this time the police were ready for him. They had all the evidence you provided, plus testimony from me and 2 other victims. What's he charged with? Fraud, extortion, identity theft, and about 6 other felonies. His lawyer says he's looking at 10 to 15 years in prison. I felt a deep satisfaction at this news. I'm glad. He hurt a lot of people. Patricia nodded. He destroyed my marriage, my business, my relationship with my children. But because of what you did, he'll never hurt anyone else. After she left, I sat alone in my office thinking about justice and consequences. James Harrison would spend the next decade in prison, paying for his crimes. Gloria was rebuilding her life in Portland, working as an HR coordinator for a small nonprofit. Daphne had been promoted to head of human resources at the regional hospital. Even Leland had found steady work at a construction company in Bangor. Everyone had moved on, found their place in the aftermath of the storm. As for me, I had my business, my reputation, and my self-respect. I'd learned that I was capable of more ruthlessness than I'd ever imagined, but I'd used that capacity to protect rather than destroy. Spring was coming to Maine. The snow was melting, revealing the green shoots of new growth beneath. In a few weeks, the lumber business would pick up as construction season began. There would be new challenges, new opportunities, new threats to face. I was ready for all of them. The phone on my desk rang, interrupting my thoughts. I glanced at the caller ID and smiled. It was Ben, probably calling about tomorrow's delivery schedule. Durand Timber, I answered. This is Glenn. Boss, you need to see the news. That bastard Harrison just got sentenced. 20 years, no possibility of parole for 15. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the last piece of the puzzle fall into place. 20 years? Judge said he was a menace to society and showed no remorse for his crimes. Called him a predator who destroyed families for personal gain. Good. Maybe he'll have time to think about what he's done. Maybe. Listen, boss, there's something else. Gloria called the office today. She wanted me to give you a message. I tensed. What kind of message? She said to tell you she's engaged to a teacher in Portland. Says he's a good man who treats her with respect. I thought about this news, waiting for some emotional reaction, jealousy, anger, sadness. Instead, I felt only a mild curiosity. That's good for her. Everyone deserves a second chance. You really mean that? I really do. Gloria made mistakes, but she's not evil, just weak and selfish. Maybe she's learned from this experience. And if she hasn't, I smiled grimly, then that's her new husband's problem, not mine. After I hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at the town I'd protected, the business I'd saved, the life I'd rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. Snow was still falling, but it was lighter now, the last gasp of winter before spring's inevitable arrival. I'd survived the storm, defeated my enemies, and emerged stronger than before. I'd learned that I was capable of both great ruthlessness and great mercy, and I'd use both qualities to protect what mattered most. In the distance, I could see lights coming on in houses throughout the town, families gathering for dinner, children doing homework, couples planning their futures together. Normal people living normal lives, protected by the knowledge that predators like James Harrison would be stopped before they could do harm. I'd given them that protection, and I'd given myself something even more valuable. The knowledge that when everything I'd built was threatened, I'd had the strength and cunning to fight back and win. The phone rang again. This time it was Marlene, calling to invite me to dinner at the tavern. A group of local business owners were meeting to discuss plans for the upcoming tourist season. I'll be there, I told her. Save me a seat. I gathered my papers, turned off the lights, and locked the office. Outside, the snow crunched under my boots as I walked to my truck. The engine started smoothly, and I pulled out onto Main Street, heading toward Marlene's tavern and the company of people who respected me, trusted me, and knew they could count on me to protect what we'd all built together. Behind me, the Durand Timber sign stood proud against the falling snow, lit by floodlights that would burn all night. 4 generations of my family had built this business, and now I'd ensured it would survive for 4 more. James Harrison was in prison. Gloria was building a new life with a man who hopefully deserved her. The town was safe, my business was secure, and I had work to do. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.